So I think you guys will learn a whole lot from Anne today, so I'll let her take the floor.
Hi, so I'm sitting, it's been a long day, I'm 7 months pregnant with our third child, so it's just one of those things that I got to do. It's the third one, so if any of you are a third child, now you know how your mom felt. We call it our grand finale. So I thought I'd split this into sort of 3 different talks. One, I just sort of give you a background on how I ended up where I am. I've had sort of a path that really meandered quite a bit, put my parents into a lot of anxiety, and they still don't know quite what I do. So for all you Asians out there, it'll probably be a very relevant story. And then I thought I'd talk about, I have sort of a split life in my professional life. I teach at Stanford as a continuation of what I did in my undergrad, and I teach a lot of entrepreneurship courses in engineering. One of the big themes that I've been teaching alongside another person you guys might be familiar with, Steve Blake, is the concept of business model development. And so I just want to give you guys sort of a crash course in what we've been thinking about and why we think about it that way. And then the third piece would be sort of a day in the life of a VC and how we see the world, to help sort of inform you on how, when you're sitting across from venture capitalists, what's sort of going through their head, if it's not complete blankness, which it actually might be sometimes. But I think that oftentimes people talk about, they don't talk about the nuances of sort of our lives, and so I think it's helpful for entrepreneurs to know what it looks like from our end, so that I think it'll help you guys in terms of when you go out and pitch your startups in the future. I also would love to tell you a little bit more about the VC landscape, because I think it is changing quite dramatically over the last few years, and how that impacts you as entrepreneurs. I'd love for this to be an interactive session, just because it'll keep me more energized. So any questions you have along the way, just pop up your hands and ask me, challenge me on any of the assumptions that I'm making, because especially on the teaching front, it really helps us develop our material as to how to make it clearer for everyone involved. So, sound good?
Yeah.
All right. So I'll start off with my background. So I grew up in Palo Alto, so I'm probably one of the few sort of real locals here. Went to Pali High. Did you go to Gunn?
Yeah.
Okay, that's forgiven. My brother actually went to Gunn, and my parents. My dad was a rocket scientist at NASA, so grew up in the shadows of a mad genius, and then my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And so my sort of vision of my future, based on what all my relatives were mechanical engineers. So I decided that I would rebel and become an electrical engineer. And so I went off to the East Coast. I went to Yale undergrad. Fell in love with robotics, of all things, and participated in this RoboCup competition when I was a senior in college. But in that process also discovered the business world, and this is sort of a serendipitous thing. I met the CEO of HP as I was giving him a tour of Yale at the time, and he asked me what I was doing during spring break, and I didn't really have anything that I was doing. So when he invited me to follow him around for 2 weeks, I sort of jumped at that opportunity. And 2 things sort of followed from that. One was I learned that mentorship is actually not just a passive thing where someone asks you for something and you give it to them. It is actually the process of proactively providing opportunities to people who wouldn't even think to ask. And so I was definitely one of those people. I never would have thought to ask Lou Platt, the CEO of HP, if I could follow him around for 2 weeks, but he was nice enough to offer that to me. And it opened up my world to a whole new kind of life that I didn't even know existed, which is he sort of introduced this possibility during that trip that that I could actually be a business person, and it was through very subtle hints, right? So he had me follow Ann Livermore, who was a female executive at HP, around for a couple of days. And then when I got home, he sent me 2 photographs, which was from the day that Bill Gates actually came to visit. And one was a photograph of me sitting there talking to Lou Platt in a chair. And the second photograph was Bill Gates sitting exactly in that chair talking to Lou Platt. And it was sort of this subtle message, you can actually be someone like that. And it was like, you know, it made my mom cry. But to me, it was like this, it was a moment that I don't think I'll ever forget, where I said to myself, wow, I could actually do something tremendous. And someone sees potential in me that I never even noticed myself. So I went back to Yale, and back then when I came back and I said, I'm really interested in business, they said, well, there's 2 options, investment banking and management consulting. And so junior summer I went to Goldman Sachs, and I did a bunch of things there and really didn't like it. So I went into management consulting at McKinsey. And I actually really enjoyed it. I spent 3 years there, and I traveled all around the world. This was back when, in 1998 to 2001, where they said, you know, wireless internet was about to take over the world. And it took a lot longer in the US, but in Japan it was really starting to take off, and I got to witness a lot of this. After I left McKinsey, I was given an opportunity to work in venture capital at Charles River Ventures on the East Coast. And again, this wasn't really a career path that I was necessarily searching out, but it was something I'd heard about when I was in high school. And so I went and met with the partner, and the partner and I bonded over, of all things, classical music and novels. And he gave me an offer on the spot, which wasn't really, here's your cash compensation, but why don't you come and work for me? And for me, I just really liked this guy, and I forgot to even ask him when he was going to pay me, and I said, sure. But it was a bet that really sort of paid off in the end, and I think there's one theme that I found is bet on amazing mentors, and you will never regret it. And so I got to work for 2 years with Ted Dintersmith, who had been in the industry for 15 years. And my second day of work, of all days, was 9/11. And so I saw the crash of venture capital. In 2 years, Ted did 1 deal. And the deal was that I also felt that I always wanted to go back to grad school. So I spent all this time trying to figure out what grad school I would go to. And I was very indecisive. I took the GMATs. I had already taken the MCATs. I took the GREs. I finally landed on the LSATs. I took every single Kaplan course you probably could take. And I was very qualified to teach all those courses by the end. But I realized that I was drawn back into my technical side, and I was missing math and engineering and computer science. And so even though I was 5 years out of school, I decided I really wanted to go back to that world. So I applied for PhD programs at the end of the day. I got into one at Stanford, where my proposal was that I wanted to model computer security. And so I was applying to operations research programs, but asking for interdisciplinary access to electrical engineering and computer science professors. Stanford was extraordinarily helpful in allowing me to do that. And so ended up back at home and started off a very long PhD program back in 2003. It ended up that I actually got to teach a lot in the engineering school, these classes that were sort of entrepreneurship. They said, you know, you have work background, you have VC background, why don't you teach some of these classes we have, which is the Stanford Technology Ventures program. If any of you went to Stanford, you probably know Tom Byers, Tina Seelig, so I got to teach with all of them. And it was just a really cool opportunity, and I think out of my entire PhD experience, including all the research that I did, it was the teaching that I actually really fell in love with. It's sort of, you meet grad students, you meet undergraduate students that are excited about something, and then you have this moment in the class where the student comes in and they're doing social network for rock climbers, and then you ask them about the research that they're doing. It turns out they're doing groundbreaking research on fuel cells. And you ask them why they aren't doing a business plan around that. And this moment where the light goes on that they actually have technical or market insight into something that they're doing in their academic and passion world actually translates into a business is actually something that's really meaningful to me. So in that process, I actually met up with this guy, Mike Maples, who is my current partner at Floodgate. He was a mentor in one of my classes. A few years later, back in 2007, I'm thinking about what I'm going to do after I graduate, and one of my dreams was to be a technical co-founder of a company. And so all the mentors that I had were suggesting that I find an angel who had really good deal flow and go see what they were up to, and find out what kind of deals they were seeing so that I could compare my ideas to that. And so I asked Mike if I could sit in with him on his deal flow, because he would become more well known in the sort of social networking Web 2.0 circles by that point. And so I'd go in every Wednesday and spend probably 12 hours with him, where we'd see about 10 deals in a single day. And then I would tell him sort of what I thought about it. And then 6 weeks later, he offered me a position if I would drop out of the PhD program. He said, you can be a partner in this fund. I just raised the fund. It's $33 million. This is March of '08. And it wasn't a terribly obvious decision what I ought to do. So Mike was fairly well known then, but the whole segment of super angels hadn't been defined. Most people thought it was crazy to just sort of jump into a partnership with one other person. And so, but there was something that was really interesting there. So I couldn't help myself. I ended up doing consulting work for him for 3 months. And then before the 3 months was up, I had already signed a partnership documents. I ended up actually not dropping out of the PhD program. I just sort of slowed it down and wrapped it up last year. But this is sort of my full-time job now as a partner. I teach every year at Stanford. We do a class with Steve Blank in the, I guess it's in the winter quarter at Stanford, to the graduate students there. We've decided to open source all of that material, so if you go to steveblank.com, you'll see everything that we teach there. And our hope is sort of that anything that we're able, that works within our classroom can sort of be replicated in the real world. And so today I want to sort of give you a little bit of a taste of the kinds of things that we've worked on. Any questions on career path?
Do you have any missed opportunities where you wish you should have done something else? Or?
Not really. I think the thing for me is I really have no regrets. I've had a very meandering path. People have always asked me what I'm going to do next, and I just always used to say I don't know. I think this is the first time where I've said, so a common question I get asked is that dream of being a technical co-founder, do I still have that? I think the thing for a venture capitalist is that you are graded on a 10-year life cycle and not on a 2 to 3 year life cycle. So if I had 1 foot out the door, I'd be doing things for my career that were very short-sighted, and I wouldn't be building real companies. And so the deal with myself was when I decided to sign on that dotted line, the partnership documents, I threw all of those aspirations away. And I'm fully committed to doing the job that I do right now. And I think that's sort of just important in general. At some point, you have to stop hedging and you have to focus.